Hey there, writer rebels. Join me today as I talk about a quick tip to make your manuscript stronger before you send it off to your editor. Hey everyone, it's me, Scarlett Kol, young adult author, YouTuber, and storyteller. And I'm here today with a super quick tip that's going to help you with your edits. Yes, editing can be a complete nightmare, but this little trick will make it a little bit easier for you to get through your edits, and it's going to be a lot cleaner for your editor. So it'll be easier to work with them and less changes for you to make in the back end. But before I get started, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to those people that keep coming back week after week. I really appreciate it. All of you subscribers out there are awesome. And even if you're not a subscriber, but you just keep coming back, I totally appreciate it. Everybody seemed to really like my self-destructive habits video last week. So if you still want to talk more about self-destructive habits, make sure you're checking out that video and leaving your comments in the comment section so we can talk a little bit more about those things that hold us back. But today we are going to be talking about something to move you forward. And this is something that I developed off a pretty common piece of advice. So when I am working on my manuscript, I keep with me a notebook, and this notebook has 3 little tabs, which I'll talk about in a second. And you could always do this in Google Sheets or Google Docs or whatever you want to do, or if you have an app on your phone or whatever. But this is something that is just, it's very simple, but it does definitely help me out and make sure that my edits going to my editor are better and better every single time. So the common advice you would usually see is that to keep a list of crutch words that you're going to check at the end of your manuscript. So if you haven't heard of this before, what a crutch word is are those words that you tend to use over and over again, or words that you should limit within your manuscript. It could be words like just, that, if you say the word smiled a lot, or whatever happens to be your particular crutch words. This has been very common advice for a really long time, to include a list of crutch words that you're going to check for every single time before you call your manuscript done. So I've kind of taken this a step further, and that's why I have 3 tabs. That first tab is going to be my crutch words, or words that I know that I'm going to need to look up. I have ones that are general that I tend to use every single time, but I do find that sometimes when I'm moving on to particular manuscripts, I will find my $5 word of the day, and I will end up using it a lot through that particular manuscript. And then the next manuscript, I will end up using a completely different word, but I will totally overuse it. It just ends up being the word that I'm interested in at the time and don't realize that I'm using over and over and over again. If I find that one is a crutch word, I usually put it in as a post-it note, or I'll put it off to the side as a particular one, because 9 chances out of 10, my next manuscript isn't going to have it anyway. Regardless, the list has got all of those things that I tend to reuse very often. If you're not sure which words you tend to overuse, you can always find those out in programs like Pro Writing Aid or Grammarly, where they're going to tell you how many instances of that word appear. Scrivener also has this built in, but I believe you can only do it by section, or you can do something really creative and create one of those like word tree picture things where it's going to show you which words you use the most. This is a good way to start populating your crutch words list. As you start working with editors, you're going to notice that they're going to tell you about certain words that you use a lot more often, because they're going to probably suggest that you eliminate a few of them. At this point, you should be writing them down on your crutch list. The next 2 things, though, are the ones that have really made the difference for me, because a lot of people know to go back at the end and look for those sorts of things. The other 2 pieces that I have here are my combined words list and my grammar list. So my second list on combined words are ones that I tend to look up all the time or tend to get wrong. And this is generally hyphenated words, or words that could be squished together or not. Is tabletop 1 word or 2? This is something that I'm going to write down in my combined words list. There's certain things that I'm always going back on to try and remember if it's hyphenated or not. I keep this list with me when I'm writing, so that way when I go to look up those things on the internet or in grammar guides or anything that I'm looking it up on, or if I happen to notice it in my edits, I'm going to write that down. So when I get to the end of my manuscript, I'm going to take a quick look for instances of those words that I know I use improperly often. like tabletop. So I'm going to be able to search for those things and make sure that I've treated them properly. It's similar to a crutch word concept, but there's a lot of people who don't really look at those things and just rely on their editor to fix them. This is a way to make sure that you're getting it right the first time so your editor can concentrate on the more finicky things. Speaking of more finicky things, this brings us to the third tab. And this one, however, is the one that I find the most important. This is the one where I keep all of my grammar rules. You know what we're talking about. It usually happens in dialogue, but not always, where you'll be sitting there and you go, okay, does the em dash go here? Are there spaces afterwards? Where exactly do the quotations go when I'm using this particular type of punctuation? How is this going to work? I ended up looking up the same things over and over and over again, or if I wasn't looking them up, I was going to end up getting them back from my editor and correcting this same problem over and over and over again. From now on, I keep those general grammar rules that I tend to look up on a regular basis in that third tab. So not only does it make it easier because as I'm writing, if I'm trying to remember how that's supposed to work with an ellipsis, I can go into my specific grammar rules and it will tell me what the right treatment is without having to search for that topic again. Because depending on how common that type of punctuation is, it can be really difficult to find what you need. Or you might find various different interpretations depending on how it's being used. This way you can use it in the examples of the way that you particularly write and the way you know you're going to use them. So yes, I know it does sound simple. Write down your crutch words, write down your compound words, and make sure you're writing down your grammar rules that you use very often. But the fact of the matter is once you're done your manuscript, not only can you use this as reference while you're writing, you can go back and check all of those things, or as while you're proofreading to make sure that those things are in place. And if you do that, you are going to have a much, much cleaner manuscript when you're giving it to your editor. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier. And if you happen to make a change after you get it back from your editor, you know exactly how to treat it properly. A bonus tip on this is if you are working with an editor, to ask them what your main problems are. So obviously you're going to see this through the manuscript and it's not particularly what you're paying them for, but some editors will comment on this and some won't. It's not a big deal to ask them very quickly, hey, as you are reading this, are there any particular areas where I tend to fall short? Are there any particular rules that I'm not following properly? So if they can lay those out for you, or you can glean that from the manuscript edits that they've given back, write it down in the book, because that way you're going to know, and you're going to know to look for it. And that is probably the biggest key. It's not even so much of treating it properly as you're working through your manuscript. It's knowing to look for these things at the end. When you're editing your book, there's so many things to do. There's character and setting and plot, and you're worried about all of these different things that by the time you get down to the nitty-gritty details, you're really just trying to get through it and you just want it to make the most sense. If you are particularly looking for things that always end up tripping you up, you're going to have a much cleaner manuscript to give to your editor. And in that case, they're going to be able to give you a much better edited manuscript because they're not focusing on these finicky little things that you should have got right in the first place. All right, so that was a short one today, but that is my tip on how to make your self-edits that much stronger. Be sure to join me next week as I'm going to talk about more topics in writing and publishing. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you haven't hit that subscription bar below this video, make sure you hit that and the notification bell so that YouTube can let you know every time I put out new content, which is typically on Thursdays. If you are also down there, you might want to hit that thumbs up button to let YouTube know that this is definitely something worth watching. I'll see you all later and you have a great week.